welcome back, ladies and gentlemen of the Aiden Horn RC YouTube channel. Chat! We are back, and this month's video is going to be a little rundown download of the Team Associated RC10 B84D baseline dirt slick racing setup options and the things that I think about at each event to tune the setup for the surface I'm racing on. The last 2 weeks we had events held at Hobby Action for the Masters of Dirt, as well as the Team Associated AE race at Trackside Hobbies and Raceway. My B84 was working amazing at both of those tracks, and we were able to come away with the W's at those events. And I'm going to walk you guys through everything I did at the race, each of the races, to achieve the space shuttle handling that I was offered by this beautiful platform, the baseline options I show up with, and we're going to hope that you guys can apply this knowledge to your B84Ds and get you guys out dominating the local track. Let's go, baby! And now we're going to shoot some clips of this John and get right into it. Starting off in the center of the car, we're going to start with the things that don't really change. The first one is going to be the battery position. I just run it in position 3 when I run slicks on dirt pretty much all the time, which is exactly in the center. So there's 6 holes, and this is the one right in the middle, or 5 holes, whatever. It's the one in the middle. I think it's position 3. Center diff, I run it in the back location, back weight bias for dirt always, with a diff, never the slipper on dirt. And I run 300,000 CST with plastic HTC gears in this bad boy just about all the time. Moving on to the servo, I run the Reedy Shorty servo all the time. Never run the big boy because we got to keep this John lightweight. We go 2 millimeters on the servo horn, 0 millimeters on this ball stud right here, and I have been just running 1 millimeter on the steering rack ball stud pretty much everywhere I go. And that's kind of the rundown for the center of the car. We got the Reedy Sonic M455 in this bad boy with the Reedy 610R ESC. Those things never change. Of course, SG6 zapper, although for trackside we had the LP 4800, which is the standard. I kind of always try to run that, but Masters of Dirt is a special occasion where we have a 10-minute main where the old 4800 just isn't going to juice that 5.5 for 10 minutes straight. So that's when we bring out the big dog, the 6400 SG6, just to get to the line. And we do have to adjust the shock package for the heavier battery, and I'll go over that later in the video, but those are the things that don't change throughout the chassis of the car. Moving on to the front end, some things I want to start with that typically don't change. First up, we have the steering plate. We make a 0, a +1, and a +2. And I think that the +2 is a little bit pushy feeling, and the 0 is kind of hard to drive. This is a pretty sensitive change, so I just stick with the +1s. I run them all the time. They deliver the most balanced feel, in my opinion. So the +1 steering plate doesn't really come off the car, and we have 0 millimeters under the ball stud that goes on the plate all the time as well. It's not something I really adjust. The front hex, I run 5 millimeters all the time. I don't really have enough threads to run 6, and 4 is kind of a aggressive feel as well. So 5 millimeters is the go-to front hex on this car. Most of the time I run 1 millimeter right here, just 0 kind of numbs out the steering feel, and 2 is pretty aggressive. Another kind of sensitive change, so I try to stick with 1 millimeter as a baseline there. The caster insert, I run +1, kind of Same as all the other changes that I don't really change. When I do stray from the +1 setting, I don't really prefer the steering feel anywhere other than +1. So I run +1 most of the time. I always run inside hole on the bottom of the front shock. I never go outside. I don't prefer the feel of outside right there. And the top of the shock doesn't change on my car either, as I always run it in the middle hole as a baseline. It's not something I think about changing. Moving on to the things that do change, we have the pills. I adjust for the amount of kick up in the front end quite a bit. Now, the B block normally stays at center, and A block, I will go less kick up in the front, so I'll drop the A block to 1 down when I need a lot of steering, or when the car is at 1 down in the A block and it's a little bit hard to drive, then I'll go to half down. But for sure, most of the time I try to run less kick up than center, because it seems to give the car a better, more crisp steering feel. Now, depending on how much steering I want will determine if I want to go 0.5 down or 1 down. So 1 down is most aggressive and 0.5 down is easier to drive. And the less kick up also goes hand in hand with the +1 caster block. If you're not running less kick up, then you probably want to run a 0 caster insert, but I prefer the feel of added caster and less kick up in the front end of this car. For whatever reason, that's just kind of what the testing goes to show. The diff height is something that I've been playing with as well. I've been bouncing back and forth between 1 and 2. It seems like if you need more steering or a more aggressive front end feel, you're going to want to run the front diff height at 1. But if the car is a little bit harder to drive and you need to just smooth it out, so it just gives an easier drive feel, then 2 has been really good at the past couple of events as well. When the grip comes up and the tires, those hot race white compounds, they make a lot of grip. So you're going to maybe want to consider going up to 2 front diff height for a little bit smoother of a steering feel. Now, the diff fluid doesn't change a whole lot. I normally run 15,000 CST with 2 metal HTC gears. You have to run metal when you run 2 gear, because the plastic ones will not hold up with the 2 gear setup, especially not with a modified motor. But plastic ring and pinion for dirt, 15,000 majority of the time. If you need the car to be a little bit easier to drive and you're on super high grip, maybe you're having problems with some diffing out, then I ran 17.5 thousand CST. 1UP Racing makes those split oils like that. So I used the 1UP Racing diff fluids, and I got 17.5 thousand in the front because at track side the grip was pretty high and I was starting to get a little bit of a tipping effect. So when I went up in the front diff, I dropped the front bar from a 1.1 to a 1.0 to allow the front end to still set and rip and grip through those corners. So it's kind of a hand-in-hand thing. I do a thicker diff with a lighter bar to make it easier to drive when it's high grip, or if it's lower grip, then you can do a thinner diff for more steering and a thicker bar to still keep maximum control over the front end. The final thing on the front end, we've been messing with this quite a bit, is on the old B74, we always ran the camber link mounted up and inside, or inside and middle, pretty much always inside. Well, with this car, we're starting to learn that the outside camber link hole seems to offer the front end more support and a more one-to-one crisp steering feel through the turn, and the front end stays more supported throughout the corner with the wider front link mount. Now, in doing that, we always also used to run a red front spring, but with the added stiffness that you get from this short camber link, you need to adjust the spring and go down in spring. So from red to yellow, this is 1 rate softer than red. So whatever spring you're running, if you want to try this camber link, I would definitely recommend going down in the front spring. But this package has offered some additional speed to the steed at these past couple races, and I think it's going to be one of those options that we start to run all the time. Onto the rear end of this immaculate space shuttle here, we're going to start with the things that don't really change from track to track, kind of just the baseline, standard, go-to, solid, day one, homey setup changes. First up, we have the shock position on the rear tower. For whatever reason, with this model, you just want to take that one and just slam it all the way down, slam that john all the way narrow, lean it all the way in, and just don't even think about changing it because seems to offer the best, most comfortable rear grip feel, maximum stability. Just lean it all the way in, don't even think about it. And the best spring to accompany that position that I've found is the nice trusty 1-Up Blue 13mm rear spring. So I just run that 13mm 1-Up Blue spring, leaned all the way in, and don't even touch it. It's mint. Next up, I pretty much run 2mm right here on the ball stud height. Darn near all the time. I don't even really think about changing that. As well as the 6mm hex. The 5 can be a little squirmaderm. And 7, you know, let's just meet in the middle. 6. I run that John all the time. And it's dialed. And then wheelbase shims. We go middle, middle. Call it good. Don't even think about it. Let it ride. Like you're at the casino on a run. Just placing it on red. Roulette table. Just let it ride. Middle, middle. Call it good. Now, some things that I do change are going to be camber link shims right here. So if you need a little bit more steering, you want the car to feel sharper and more reactive, you can go 2mm here. There's currently 1mm on it right now. Just trying to get, you know, just a nice even feel there. If you want the car to be easier, lazier, less crispy on the wheel, just more Cadillac, you can go 0. If you want it to be sharp, you can go 2. And right now I have 1 meeting in the middle, which is a nice balanced, happy medium. So that is something that I look at when I'm tuning this car quite often, is that camber link shim right here. I use the factory team carbon shims, and they work out quite nicely for me. And then the pills. I change the pills on this car. It feels like every run sometimes, just because it seems to be a very go-to type play in the playbook, if that makes sense. So pretty much, if you need more grip in the rear end, you can either add toe through this. I like to do that through the C block. I just add 0.5 or maybe even 1 degree of toe in the C block. Or if you need more steering, you could add a little bit of anti-squat, kick up that rear arm to get the weight transfer to be a little bit more aggressive, more weight on the front tires. You could just add some anti-squat. You could lower the pills for more grip. You could raise the pills for more steering. I mean, the pills, you can adjust them from the C or the D. The pill changes are going to be probably one of your best friends on this car if you can kind of understand what you want out of the car and make the adjustment with the pills. Then it will help you tune from track to track a ton. So that is something that I'm constantly thinking about, is my pill inserts and how they could affect the way the car is driving. At Masters of Dirt, I ran lower pills to get more chassis clearance over the whoop section, more rear end stability, grip. I also ran a little bit extra toe in the C block, and that offered the most rear grip to basically make it the easiest to not blow it off the track into the driver's stand every lap going through the whoop section and hitting that front triple. But then trackside is a tight track. There's already a lot of grip available, so you raise the pills back up and you don't need to run the added toe. So right now we just have the D block 0.5 down, and you know, I gotta check what is even in these pills because they change like every run, but it looks like right now we ended with the C block center and the D block half down. So we had no added toe and added anti-squat, which makes sense because we're on such a tight track. Those two things are going to help you in the corners be faster as well. Rear bar, I guess I probably should have just put it in one of the categories that doesn't change. I kind of just throw a 1.3 on that John and let it rip. A neat feature that is soon to hit the market that I'd like to point out that I've been running on this car is the factory team vertical ball stud mount. We had one on the B74 and it seemed to be a hot commodity. Everyone liked the feel, and that is no different with this car. This is a different tower and ball stud mount than the old one. It's currently a prototype, but I do believe it will be available very soon. And I'm just running 3.5 millimeters on it. There's 2 height positions, up and down. I have it in the down position, mounted inside with 3.5 millimeters, and I think that's a pretty standard baseline. One of the things that I don't really consider changing. And if you don't have the vertical ball stud mount, the closest option that you can have on the kit is just in and down on the tower, and it should be pretty similar overall. And then if I forgot to mention previously, another thing that I don't really change in the rear end is diff height. 2 has been seeming to be my best friend at these clay slicks races, so I just run that John at 2, let it rip, and you'll be ripping and gripping. Hot lap TQ, let's go. So a hot topic in the tuning pits here at associated with this vehicle from track to track has been the axle height. And I will say it does depend pretty heavily on the track that you are at on what axle height you want to run. And I will say for slicks racing, you either want to run 1 or 2. And I have noticed that which you run 1, you should just run it front and rear. Just keep the front and rear axle height the same. I wouldn't recommend swapping them because that's when you start to lose some feel of the balance. So if you're going to run 1, just run 1 front and rear, and same with 2. But the way to determine whether or not to run 1 or 2 is if the car feels like it is very aggressive, hard to drive, you're flipping a lot, it's kind of like a rigid feel. So let's say for everyone that runs at Hoosier RC Hobbyplex, the grip is extremely high, and you can flip off the track easy. If you're having problems like that, then it typically means that your car is very rigid and stiff. Like you go into the corners and you're picking up the inner wheels because the suspension's unable to roll. That means your car's too stiff. So what you want to do is lower the axle to make the geometry of the car softer, which will allow it to roll and actually use the suspension in the corners instead of just overloading the tire and flying off the track. So if you're at Hoosier, you want to run 1 axle height front and rear. Or when I was at trackside, the grip was extremely high and I was having problems with 2-wheeling in the sweeper or coming out of the straightaway. So 1 axle height was also my friend there, which is why there's 1 axle height on this car right now. But at Hobby Action for the Masters of Dirt race, the grip was a little bit lower and I wasn't having any problems with flipping. In fact, I actually just needed more speed in the corners, so I ran axle height 2 just to make the car more supported and put more weight on the tire throughout the corners, and it seemed to be the most stability, grip, best balance for those 2 things with axle height 2 at Hobby Action, and there was no problems with knifing or anything like that. So axle height 2 at Masters of Dirt and axle height 1 at Hoosier and trackside. And if you've been at any of those tracks or you have any other home track that you go to, then just try to use that as kind of a reference. But even with the axle height at 1 or 2, I prefer the diff height to be at 2 front and rear regardless of what the axle height is. So I'm kind of just leaning on the fence of just leaving the diff heights at 2 and adjusting the axles. As promised, I'm going to go over the shock packages and how I change them from track to track or adjust based on either you're running the big battery or the jumps on the track are bigger or smaller or the bumps or anything like that. So I basically have 2 main shock packages that I run, and I ran my 2 different shock packages at each race. So Masters of Dirt, there was like huge jumps with gnarly landings, and the jumps were just crazy. I was launching it off of, basically the ceiling every single lap, and I had the 6400 battery pack in that John, so the car was really heavy, and I'm basically launching it 100 feet in the air 10 times a lap, and you just need the car to land plush in order to just give you that sense of comfort that you're going to land and not die. So at Masters of Dirt, I ran the Shell Racing extra thick piston. It was 2.7 thickness with 2x18 front and 2x19 rear. 3730 for the oil, and it was felt kind of thick on the bench, but you know, it landed good, it landed plush, and it gave me a little bit of margin of error to work with on that front section, trying to hit that big jump clean every lap. So that was kind of just the best compromise that I could come up with for the shock package there, and I thought that the car handled really well with that shock package and the big battery and all that. So if you're dealing with big jumps and heavier car, then I would run the thick piston with 2x18, 2x19, 3730, call it good. But trackside, we went to trackside, and the grip was pretty high. There was really no jumps on the track where there was ever like a flat land or anything like that. So I didn't have to worry about making the car land good, and I had my lightweight battery, so the landing wasn't a concern, but there was some high grip sweepers with a little bit of bumps that you wanted the car to be nice and plush through, so you can just kind of send it. So when I'm not running the thick piston, I run the thin piston, the 2.0 millimeter factory team option that we do offer. I ran that with a 1x7 by 1, or a 1.7 by 1.8 front and a 1.8 by 1.9 rear with the same oil, 3730. You can tune the rear oil for, if you want more grip, you can drop the rear oil down to 27, or you can drop the front oil down to 35 if you need more steering, but I just ran 3730, call it good, and it was a pretty good balance of what I wanted as far as just steering and suppleness in the sweeper, so I could just kind of launch it in the straightaway and crank the wheel and be fine. So quick in the turns, no jumps, you want to run thin pistons, get the car moving, suspension moving, soaking up those bumps, and yeah, let it rip. Those are the two shock packages I run, and other than that, I always stick with the trusty lens bodies by Hot Race Urus 4 body on this John. I recommend a 7-inch wing on dirt surfaces for maximum easiness to drive. And that is just about all I can cover on this car. Those are the things that I think about at the track and the tuning options I make from event to event. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope that you can use this information to go to your local track and absolutely dominate. And we'll see you on the next video.